Are you thinking about giving this thing called keto a try? Or have you made the decision to give it a serious shot, but you have some questions, some concerns, and you don't know where to go? Well, this video is for you. Hope you enjoy it. Team, it's Mike here at After 40 Fitness and after40fitness.ca. The keto diet, the keto regimen really is taking the world by storm. People are losing a ton of weight, getting lean, getting fit, getting healthy, reducing their medications. If you haven't yet, please hit subscribe. Don't forget to hit that bell icon, hit notifications and select all. I'm putting out 2 or 3 videos a week, and you'll want to get notified when that happens. You'll know from the title if it's of interest to you or not, but this kind of a topic right here, you want to share this with your friends. If you know anybody who's doing keto or would like to consider it, is thinking about it, is talking about it, please do share this content once you've enjoyed it yourself. As a caveat, I will say this: I am by no means a doctor. I've been in the personal training space since 1993, so coming up on 3 decades. It's remarkable. And in that entire time, I've always helped people with nutrition. And as we've learned more from the Atkins days, as studies have helped, and as our education and our knowledge has improved, so of course has Atkins improved to keto, and here we are. Okay, but on that note, if I do say anything that causes you concern, that causes you grief, that raises questions, you absolutely need to take my recommendations and go see your family practitioner or a certified clinical nutritionist. All right, make sure you do that. I'll give you the benefit of my experience, but I am not a GP. Please see your own family doctor before implementing anything you consider questionable. Okay? Let's look at the agenda for the discussion. By the way, if you are brand new to keto, I do recommend just start from the beginning, run through the next hour, make notes, put some comments in the comment section on anything you'd like clarified. The best questions I turn into videos just like this one. So great information. You're about to see the itinerary. If you're not new and you just want to pick out a topic, feel free to jump ahead to that section. Here we go. What are the topics we are going to cover in this video? What is keto? What is ketosis for that matter? Have you heard the phrase muscle sparing? Do you know what that means as it relates to keto? Oh, so good. Such an important topic. As is fat adapted. What does it mean to be fat adapted? How long does it take? We'll talk about that. Yes, there are types of keto regimens. Keto has been broken down into modalities, and depending on which one suits you and your journey, you'll want to know so you can pick the right one. Macros. Have you heard that term, macros? If so, do you know what they are and how to track them? We'll get into that. Food choices. We'll talk about meal selection, some food items that are and are not keto. We'll even talk about Bulletproof Coffee. Interesting topic. Intermittent fasting. Do you plan on doing that along with keto or not at all? Do they blend? We'll talk about that. Testing for the state of ketosis. If you're like me, you want visual confirmation, even if you know you're doing all the right things. So we'll look at that as well. The battle continues between total and net carbs. Do you know which one you're going to use? Let's get into that. We will talk about the keto flu, what the symptoms are and how to avoid it. We'll talk about supplements. Are there supplements that you should consider strongly recommended, even mandatory, or are they all completely optional? We'll spend a few minutes on that. We'll talk about exercising on keto. And then I'm going to finish with 30 tips, 30 recommendations, just little tweaks I've learned in the last 2 decades. Hopefully you can steal a couple of those and apply them in your journey. Okay, you ready? Let's get after it. Healthline gave this definition to get the ball rolling of what a ketogenic diet entailed. It's a very low carb, high fat diet that shares many similarities with the Atkins and other low carb diets. It involves drastically reducing carb intake, replacing it with fat, and this puts your body into a metabolic state called ketosis. So keto being this regimen, you'll hear people talk about different things that they think keto means. Some will say it means whole foods only, no processed foods. It means no inflammatory foods. Nonsense. At its heart, keto is a diet that results in a metabolic state called ketosis.
You keep using the word. I don't think it means what you think it means.
People who like to push, I typically think an agenda. Okay, I'm going to be honest with you. The keto diet can be done healthily and not healthily. It's still a keto diet if it results in a metabolic state called ketosis. The reduction in carb intake puts your body into this metabolic state called ketosis, where fat, both from your diet and from your body, nudge, nudge, wink, wink, is burned for energy. Okay, so don't be fooled by any other definition of what keto is. When people say keto, a food can be keto. That's a keto food, or that's not a keto food. It's in relation to this metabolic state. So if you were to call a food non-keto, then the most non-keto food would be sugar, dextrose, glucose, fructose. Okay, sugar would be the polar opposite because it forces your body to burn glucose for energy, not fat. It takes you out of this state called ketosis. And yet, make no mistake, we can all have sugar on a keto diet and maintain ketosis. One thing you'll learn, and I'll tell you what I did for my own personal example, is once I got into ketosis, and we'll talk about testing in a minute, I began to test my upper threshold to see how many carbs, of which sugar is one, how many carbs I could ingest on a daily basis before I lost this metabolic state called ketosis. So I, like everyone else, in the early phase, went down to about 20 grams. We'll talk about this in a second as well. About 20 grams of carbs over the course of a day. And then once I was deep into ketosis, I was able to start in 5-gram increments, increase my carb intake because I wanted to see when I would begin to impact this metabolic state called ketosis. And I was able to get up to about 55 to 60 grams of carbs per day before my ketosis dropped. Okay, 55 to 60. So you'll hear people talk about foods not being keto. It's nonsense. All foods in small amounts can be had on a keto diet. Any other conversation about are they inflammatory, are they unhealthy, is a different topic. Okay, you're welcome to make keto for you on your journey be much more than just a metabolic state called ketosis. That's entirely your call. But just be clear what the keto diet is. Okay, at its heart, it's a diet, a low carb, ultra low carb diet that results in a metabolic state called ketosis. Just so you know, it's so good for so many therapeutic reasons. It was actually first known discovery was in the early 20s, and it was prescribed by doctors to kids with epilepsy. It's actually surprisingly good for all neurological disorders, but epilepsy being one, Alzheimer's and dementia see improvements in cognitive ability when we take the brain away from using glucose as an energy and give it fatty acids and in particular ketones. We'll talk about that some more bit down the road as well. What the diet is not, it's not meant to be a diet program, it's meant to be a lifestyle. Make no mistake. This is one thing that happens a lot is people will fall off a diet program. If that is something that you think will happen with keto, you will put the weight back on. It's too difficult not to. Our body becomes very carb receptive. And as soon as we stop the keto program and start ingesting carbs again, believe me, you'll switch back to fat burning to glucose burning in a hurry, and you will bounce. Right? People who don't stick with the keto diet, make it a keto lifestyle, will tend to slide backward. I want to digress really quickly and talk about the use of the word diet. In the keto space, diet is not really a well-received word. More popular is lifestyle or WOE, way of eating. I don't worry about the semantics. You can decide how much it's important to you, but I want you to notice real quick. I'm going to throw up a graphic. I went just to Google and said define diet. Notice definition number 1, the kinds of food that a person, animal, or community habitually eats. This is why, in case you're wondering, you know what we call the normal fare of the average Canadian or American? We call it the standard American diet. Truly not a diet, but in this definition number 1, it's a standard American diet. It's what our community habitually eats. Number 2, the definition, of course, which is a special course of food that one restricts themselves to for the purpose of either losing weight or medical reasons. That's probably what you think of more often, right, when you hear the word diet. And it's for this reason that people who get tied up on the semantics of the word diet, they disapprove, because to them keto is a lifestyle. It becomes a lifestyle change. Anyway, just so you're clear that if you see someone balk at the use of the word diet in relation to keto, this is why. Second, it's not the same as ketoacidosis. You ever heard that term, ketoacidosis? That is something that comes up periodically because people will say, well, but keto's dangerous because of ketoacidosis. And it is a condition that is only happens for type 1 diabetics. Type 1 diabetics do not produce insulin on their own, right? Not naturally. And because of that, the ketones in their system can just go like by a factor of 10, a multitude of 10 more than we can get to naturally on a keto diet. So when you hear people talk about, if you do hear this term ketoacidosis, don't fret. It's not possible to achieve for people who have a working pancreas. All right, it's just one of those things that only afflicts type 1 diabetics. Ketonians have no need to fear it. And one thing that comes up periodically is that it will cost you muscle. You know, it's funny that people say that. There's no diet that's better for keeping lean muscle than the keto program. Let me explain that real quickly. About 30%, depending on the study, but about 30% of your weight loss on any other diet program will be muscle loss. Right? That's hard to fathom. But 30%, so if you drop 10 pounds, 3 of it was muscle. Keto is referred to as muscle sparing. And muscle sparing means that it drastically reduces the amount of muscle that's lost, not muscle proof. All right, so make no mistake, there is a little bit, but minuscule by comparison, somewhere in the 6 to 8, no more than 10% range. If you don't exercise and you don't have high protein, then there will be a tiny bit of muscle loss that just comes along with weight loss. Right? But it's vastly reduced. Again, muscle sparing is that difference between 30% and 8%. So it's muscle sparing. It's not muscle proof. Just like I have a nice watch. You know, when you buy watches now, they don't call them waterproof anymore. You'll never hear that term. They're water resistant, meaning at some point, at some depth, some water will get in. Well, make no mistake. Keto is not muscle proof. It's muscle sparing. Because at some point in a drastically or long-term calorie-reduced program, you run the risk. Now, there are ways to mitigate it. Let's talk about those really quickly. The 2 ways to mitigate any muscle loss is 2 things. One is resistance training, stimulate a bit of growth, but be high protein. And when I say high, I don't mean absurd amounts, but we'll talk about that in a second when we get to macros, but just higher than norm, but we'll get to that in a second. There's a phrase I want you to learn about really quickly here. It's called keto adaption, or being fat adapted is another way of putting it. You'll see here keto adaption, also sometimes called fat adaption. It is a process. Everyone achieves it. Yeah, it's almost inevitable if you stick with your keto diet long enough. As you read through this slide, you'll see that your body goes through a program, a change, a metabolic change, where it changes from using glucose as your primary energy source to using fatty acids and ketones. So just so you know a bit of the physiology, when you burn fatty acids in the liver for energy, a byproduct of oxidizing fatty acids is this molecule called a ketone. In fact, there's several kinds of ketones, but nonetheless, that is a byproduct of the liver burning fatty acids. Well, guess what? Not only does it produce these ketones, but then the rest of the body can also use those ketones as fuel. Oh, the body's remarkable. So from this website, you can see that it's part of the process of our body becoming very well adapted, very efficient at this process of switching over to burning, after a lifetime of burning carbs and glucose for fuel, to burning fatty acids and ketones. And you can see that in the process, your body can now even prefer, in the presence of glucose, it can still stick to and prefer ketones and fatty acids as a fuel source. Your hormones and enzymes are tweaked. That is really what keto adaptation means. When you first try the keto program, there are some feedback loops in our body from carb starvation. Right? We've been so used to and addicted to carbs for a lifetime that our body somewhat rebels. And in fact, there's a term for that called the keto flu. We'll talk about that in just a second as well. This keto adaptation process takes between 4 and 6 weeks. Seems to be the norm. For me, it was in the 4th week. I'll tell you what happened. So when I first got into ketosis, which was quick, it was somewhere in the 36 to 48 hour range, I began testing for ketones and had them. Well, I don't mind telling you, the next week was horrendous. I strength like a little 7-year-old girl. I couldn't work out well. I wasn't pushing any weight in the gym. HIIT workouts, right? Circuit training killed me. Just no stamina, no persistence. It was really demoralizing. And for me, right around the 4th week, all of a sudden, boom, I show up in the gym and I'm pushing out new personal bests. My HIIT workouts, destroying them. Even the wife noticed. So, long story short, you'll want to get to this phase of keto adapted. And for every person, it's different. I have heard of it taking 2 months. And yet for me, it was in the 4th week. Okay, so good to know. Next topic, types of keto regimens. Mike, what do you mean, types of keto regimens? This graphic summed it up so nicely. I was going to type this all out, and I came across this graphic and I thought, beautiful. So at least whoever wrote this graphic started out by saying that keto is a diet with the goal, as we talked about, of a metabolic state of ketosis. Thank God. All right, so at least someone's level-headed. Here's where the judgment, right? And I use that term loosely because perhaps that's not the case, but you can tell by the terms strict versus dirty versus lazy that someone judgmental came up with these terms. I could have come up with much better terms that are nowhere near as judgmental, right? Much less controversial. But these are the three main ones, and I summarize them all as flexible. You'll see what I mean in just a second. So strict keto is a diet, a version of keto that eliminates inflammatory, starchy and sugary foods is a given. They all avoid starchy and sugary foods. However, the strict person, the strict ketonian, will take that one step further to eliminate any foods that are a known source of inflammation, regardless of the amount. They will also insist on whole foods and non-processed foods. Here's two quick examples of how a strict keto practitioner makes food choices. Number one, no added sugar. So even though you and I know that we're allowed 20 grams a day of carbs, and all 20 of that for that matter could potentially be sugar, a strict ketonian will make the decision that there's zero added sugar allowed in their menu plan. Here's another, artificial sweeteners. Whether right or wrong, whether they truly are a source of inflammation or not, a strict ketonian avoids artificial sweeteners for no other reason than that they're artificial. Right? Who knows what the milligrams per day could do? Now, conversely, a dirty, or what I call a flexible keto practitioner would look at those items and say, I'm allowed 20 grams or 25 grams a day. So therefore, how I use it is none of your concern. If I want to fill my belly with 20 grams of table sugar, I can do that, still stay in ketosis, and you can go ahead and judge me and call me dirty. Right, that's the difference between the two. And a dirty practitioner will get all the benefits of keto and still enjoy a Diet Coke or a sugar-free Monster periodically. Lazy is one step further. Lazy, on top of not tracking anything, lazy just focuses on carbs. If you know that at the end of the day that all you need to do is come in under whatever your threshold is, whatever your personal max is, let's say it's 25 grams per day, and if that's all you care about, and God bless everything else, you're going to enjoy it, then that gets called lazy, since all you're focusing is on one section of the keto diet, which is the big one, being ultra low carb. Again, whoever came up with that term lazy just drives me nuts. I hate it. And then there is a low carb, high fat diet. And just by way of extension, that's not keto. A low carb, high fat diet doesn't care about ketosis. So I know many people who say, Mike, I don't want to go down to 20 or 30 grams. I don't need to, but I do appreciate the value of limiting my sugar intake. I'm going to cut out sweets. I'm going to cut out bread. I'm going to try to come in the 75 to 100 gram carbs per day. I got to tell you something. There's merit in that. There are people who see a lot of improvement in a lot of way in performance, in cognition, by just limiting out carbs, but not getting into a state of ketosis. Well, we're not talking about that. We are looking for ketosis, but nonetheless, that is a regimen. So you need to decide where you're going to fit. And frankly, the recommendation, probably the best thing you could do, is to start off strict. I recommend all my clients, when they come in here for personal training and they ask about nutrition, and I mention that I'm keto/carnivore, I vacillate between the two. They'll often say, love to, like, fill me in on it. What do I need to do? And I'll spend a couple of hours and I'll walk them through what they need to do, just as I am in this video. And then I'll turn around and say, I'm going to recommend you start strict. Start strict. Get into ketosis. Get through that 4 to 6 waiting period to get into fat adapted mode. And then you can begin to add back some of the foods that you personally have no problem with. Throw in cheeses, okay? Or if you have avoided nuts up until now, even though you have to keep track of the calorie count, throw in a tablespoon per day of peanut butter. Those are the kind of things we need to talk about, and you'll need to decide on your journey where you fit in. All right. Personally, right now, I vacillate between lazy and dirty, hence what I call flexible keto. When I'm doing keto, most of the time right now, I'm doing another version of carnivore, actually called PSMF. If you ever come across the term PSMF, I like to stagger between keto and PSMF. And PSMF stands for protein sparing modified fast. A protein sparing modified fast is a version of keto where you double, if not triple, your protein per day. It's ultra high protein. Again, protein sparing modified fast. This would be the closest version of keto that can truly be called protein proof. Whoever named it went with protein sparing modified fast. But it's designed to up your protein so much so that your just abundance of amino acids in your system combined with training, it not only guarantees you don't lose any muscle, it's the most helpful method of keto that lets you probably add a pound or two, as I've done over the last 10 years, a pound or two of muscle per year. Okay? Next topic is macros. Have you heard that term already? Macros are the building blocks of all the food you and I eat. And you can see here on the image, there are three of them. There's carbs, protein, and fats. All food breaks up into carbs, protein, and fats. Well, we've done something fun with those macros in the keto space. We've limited carbs as close to zero as possible, but since that would be carnivore, we do have an allowance in keto for about 5%. This graphic shows a range of 5 to 10. And again, as we talked about, once you're keto adapted, you're fat adapted, if you want to play with the upper limit and see where you fall in the 5 to 10 range, you are welcome to. Initially, though, we want the goal to be of your total daily expenditure of calories, daily intake of calories, 5% and no more in the first phase should be from carbs. 20 to 25% is protein. I'm, again, as you've heard me say already, a fan of as much protein as I can reasonably ingest in a day, which has me in the 25 to 30% range myself, and the remainder, as you can see, coming from fat. I'm going to introduce you to three words, okay, that I want you to remember as you consider these three items. One, carbs. Carbs are a limit. If you set your limit, and you should initially have set your limit to say to the overall most common value is 20 grams per day of carbs. That is a limit. You should do your absolute utmost not to exceed 20 grams. Okay? That is considered a limit. That's considered a ceiling. Protein, on the other hand, isn't a limit or a ceiling. Okay, all right? However, we do set a goal that you want to hit every day. Make no mistake, you do yourself a huge injustice if you routinely miss your protein target or your protein goal. Going over by 10, 20%, God bless you. Gorgeous. You may even spark a little bit of muscle protein synthesis, but do not come in under, right? As we talked about, your job is to make this regimen, this keto diet, if you will, as protein sparing as possible. To do that means you need to hit your protein macro every day, right? No exceptions. If anything, add 20 or 30%. I personally aim for about 50% more protein than I need on a daily basis. But again, I live in a world where I'm trying to increase muscle mass for myself and my clients. You have to elect if that's a goal for you as well. It should be. Your goal should be to get as close to zero muscle loss, regardless of the reason. I don't know if you've heard the term sarcopenia. Look this up. This is interesting. Sarcopenia is muscle loss just due to aging, age-related muscle loss. It means that the average person, male and female, between the age of about 30 and 60, loses about 30% of their muscle mass. Well, I don't know about you. I work way too hard for what I've got to give it away just because old man aging said I had to. So I up my protein and I work out every day. Okay, think about that. Take that on. A little bit of resistance training will stop the loss and may even add a pound or two. And then fat, we call the lever. Fat is where you fill in the gap, right? Fat is where you'll eat till you're full. The term is satiated, right? Protein and fat are very satiating. Right? Carbs, not at all. As you know, if you've ever gone on a carb binge, you can eat, and never stop. Carbs have no satiating effect, whereas protein and fat very much do. So the bulk of your diet will be protein and fat. Obviously, the bulk of it's fat. All right, so fatty choices of meat will help, i.e. bacon. I love bacon. Bacon has almost that perfect 1-to-1 ratio of protein to fat. That's gorgeous. So do ribeye steaks. Ribeye are awesome for that reason. Fat is where we're going to create our caloric deficit. All right, so while fats will be upped in order to compensate for the loss of carbs, because we're cutting carbs out of our menu, right? We'll replace that with fats, but that not going right to the full daily requirements for calories, we'll use fat to create our deficit. We'll never use protein to create our deficit. I hope you got that. Are you familiar with how to correlate macros with calories? I know I just said that macros make it an easy way to count calories. Do you understand the relationship? Let me throw up an image real quick and that'll tie it all together for you really quickly. This is how we correlate grams with calories. You'll notice that carbs and protein both have a 4-to-1 ratio, that 1 gram equals 4 calories. Now, before I go any further, let me just tell you, this has come under a bit of scrutiny lately, that whether it's exactly 4 and exactly 9 for fats, immaterial. This is the best we have. Call it a guideline instead of a rule, but it is the best we have. And in some cases, they've been able to show that protein, for example, might, for some protein sources, have 3.8 calories per gram, and in other cases might have 4.4. Or that some fats have got 8 and others have 10. Call these averages then. It doesn't really matter, but at the end of the day, we use these numbers to figure out both our macros and our caloric needs. So I went over to a website called 310nutrition.com. Another great site, another great resource, 310nutrition.com. And they had this image up for a woman who happened to have a caloric daily need of 1696. And you can see that without any further information, they just said, okay, here's your grams of carbs, fat, and protein. And I thought, this is cool. I like this. I like how they did this. But maybe you're wondering, okay, I get it now that 1,700 calories can break out into these, but what are they for percentages? Do you think, looking at these numbers, uses the keto methodology of 5% from carbs, 25% from protein, and the rest from fat? Well, unless you know the math that I just showed you in the previous slide, you wouldn't know. So maybe do this with me really quickly. Grab a calculator. Let me show you how to figure this out on the fly. Let's take one of the macros. This is the easiest way to do it. We'll take the protein of 130. How many calories per gram? 4. So let's figure out how many calories 130 grams equals. Multiply by 4, 520 calories. So of the 1,700, 520 are going to come from protein. Now, the quickest way to figure out this ratio, to see what ratio they use, is now just take the 520 and divide it by the 1,700. So divide by 1696. 520 divided by 1696 is exactly 30%. So 310 Nutrition, man, they love my style. I love it. I couldn't believe that's why I went with this graphic, because they also like 30%, or a target, a goal of 30% of calories coming from protein. Now, conversely, that tells me that they probably are off on the carbs. The carbs look a bit high to me. So let's do it one more time. Take the 42 for carbs. 42. Multiply by 4 calories per gram. So times 4 equals 168. So of the 1,700 total calories, 168 are going to come from carbs. Okay? Again, do the dividing. 168 divided by 1696 equals 9.9%. So on this one particular regard, I love the protein and I don't like the carb, which means the rest, I won't do the math on it, but the rest get to be from fat. It worked out to 112. Notice that in grams, be careful about this. This throws people all the time, but my protein grams are higher than my fat grams. Often. Mine are for sure. Mine's a 2-to-1 ratio in grams. But remember, how many calories per gram of fat? 9. More than double that of protein. But the total grams of fat still works out calorically to 60% of the calories, right? 30 came from protein, 10 came from carbs, leaving 60%. 60%, well more than half, even though 112 is much less than 130. Let's stop for a quick second. I'm going to flip over to a website. What I did was I just went ahead and did that. I Googled for a macro calculator, and one of the options took me to this page here, Transparent Labs. I selected Imperial, even though I live in Canada. Male, 50, 5'10", weigh 190, goal weight. And what I elected to do here was just to show to maintain. You're going to like this information. It's really kind of cool. I then selected my lifestyle. Sedentary, light activity, active, or very active. I went with active since I spend a good part of my day doing active activities. I also had the 3 choices of light, moderate, or heavy weights. And so I went with moderate. And what's your goal? In my case, you have a choice. Lose a lot. Remember, I put 190 and my current weight is 190. So for me, I went with body recomp. And notice the option, lose a little fat, gain a little muscle. So I'd like to stay at 190, but if I could drop from 12% or 13% body fat to 10, and conversely at the same time gain 2 or 3 more pounds of muscle to offset that, ideal. It asks what I like as far as macros go. Do I want to follow keto or the zone or vegan or low carb? Low carb, high protein. Let's talk about this real quickly. Obviously, this one's perfect. When it comes to protein, carbs, and fat, I'm going to select the keto. The 30 is perfect. I was actually surprised to see this. I expected somewhere in the 20 to 25 range. So that this calculator determined that protein should be at 30%. I loved carbs at 5%, fat making up the remaining 65. And I want you to see what happens. It's going to calculate on the fly and tell me a couple of things. It's going to tell me There you go. That while my total daily energy expenditure is probably 2,212, it's going to recommend a slight deficit of 1990. However, because protein is 25% at 124, even despite this little bit of a deficit, I should be able to do that body recomp. The calorie deficit is going to help me to drop fat by a couple of percent, only 155 grams, 70%. 25 protein, so a hair high, but still maintaining 5% carbs or 25 grams. Didn't that work out well? And that will still have me in a slight deficit, so I should be able to chip away at those last couple percent that drive me nuts of body fat, and at the same time perhaps replace it with a pound or two of muscle. I love this image. It nicely shows in pyramid form the kinds of foods you'll eat to make up your macros on a daily basis. So 70%-ish, 65 to 70% will come from fats, right along the base. And you can see avocado and butter there. I assume olive oil. Wonderful sources of good quality fats, right? That'll make up the bulk of what your energy needs, especially now that we've cut carbs out. Second level, of course, being proteins. You'll notice fatty cuts, grass-fed and well-caught whenever and wherever possible. If that's not possible for you, if you hear the term grass-fed, grass-finished, and you can't get it, can't find it, can't afford it, God bless you. Don't worry about it. All right? You make do with what you can, and the meat in your local butcher is just fine. When it comes to vegetables, you can determine your level of interest. I personally, other than salads, I'm not a big cruciferous eater. Third is nuts and cheese. Again, be careful with quantity. It's very easy to overdo. One thing you got to be careful about is cheese and nuts are very calorie dense. A tablespoon of peanut butter, a tablespoon is like 110 or 120 calories. Okay, so be careful. They're allowed, they're keto, but again, in moderation. And lastly, while we really don't talk about sugars of any form, fructose and sucrose and dextrose all being out, I will say that berries, you'll notice options include raspberries, blackberries, and blueberries. On the contrary, they have low calories. They have low amounts of naturally occurring sugar. They have some fiber, but the antioxidant value of them, the value they bring, outweighs the little bit of carbs. So we make a tolerance, and if you do want to have daily a couple of berries, you're welcome to. Look at that typical breakfast for me. Right? Bacon and eggs, gorgeous. Cup of black coffee beside it. I could have that for, I don't know about you guys, I could have that for breakfast every day. No problem. Lunch or dinner for that matter. Steak and broccoli. Okay, so again, you can see well seasoned, barbecued, a little dripping butter on them. Oh, that's gorgeous. Can't go wrong. A nice chicken breast over salad with a side of avocado. Doesn't that look yummy? Goodness. And as far as snacks go, you can be creative. I really recommend look up keto recipes, look up keto cookbooks. It really has become a booming industry. There's probably about a couple of hundred keto-based, carnivore-based cookbooks that you can snag and learn from. This right here, what I show, is one of my favorite snack in the evening when I'm still hungry and I'm looking for something. This is called, I call this pseudo nachos. These nachos are actually made from pork rinds. Okay, so you can look that up. Pork rinds are like pork fascia that are deep fried. Anyway, they have the nice crunch. They taste like chips, like nachos, but they're 100% collagen. They're pure protein. You cover with a little bit of cheese. In this example here, I show a little bit of hamburger, a little dollop of sour cream on top. Delish. Okay, so don't think for a second, if you ever hear anybody say the keto lifestyle is limiting, that's only limited by their imagination. Next up, Bulletproof Coffee. Have you been waiting for this? Yeah, Bulletproof Coffee is probably one of the most common topics talked about in social media when it comes to keto. Especially if you love coffee. If you've had a coffee addiction for years, especially with the milk and the cream and the sugar, then Bulletproof Coffee may just be the saving grace. It may be what makes keto sustainable for you. So what we do, in case you haven't heard of Bulletproof Coffee, it's a name given to a coffee that's been fortified, if you will, with fats. You can drop in a cube of butter, tablespoon of butter, a dollop of heavy whipped cream. Oh, that's my preference personally. Some MCT oil or coconut oil. Froth it up, mix it up in your Ninja into a nice, as you can see here, a couple of images of it. Gorgeous, really delicious. An easy way to get coffee, to get the benefits of caffeine and the polyphenols. By the way, we should talk about that real quick. Coffee and tea, absolutely allowed on all versions of keto. But I'll tell you, it's delicious. You put a little bit of butter or ghee, even better, some cinnamon. Oh, so good. So coffee and tea come with those polyphenols that are very good for our digestive system. Coffee also, in case you didn't know, very good for fat oxidation. It actually helps us with our keto state. And if you know what autophagy is, we'll get into autophagy in another video in depth, promotes autophagy. So Bulletproof Coffee, can't recommend it enough. Enjoy. Have a couple as long as you're not affected by the caffeine. Typically people will have a cup or two in the morning, maybe right after lunch. But if you're at all affected by caffeine, if it affects your sleep, if you know that it affects your cortisol levels, make sure not past like 2 p.m., maybe 3 p.m. on the outside. Let's touch now on intermittent fasting. Intermittent fasting is also periodically referred to as time-restricted eating. And what it actually refers to is just confining our timing of eating into a smaller window per day than you're used to. Think about it for a second. In fact, the last 30 years, we've really been told to eat more often, smaller meals more often. So what's really happened is in the last couple generations is we've been admonished to eat from the moment we get up, a small breakfast, a mid-morning snack, a lunch, a mid-afternoon snack, dinner, and maybe even another snack before bed, potentially eating 6 or 7 times a day. That may have suited a bodybuilder's regimen who's eating protein that often for the purpose of putting on mass. But for the bulk of us, that just resulted in us putting on fat. And the reason for that is, and I'll show a couple of graphics here, the topic here at hand is insulin. So one of the things keto does by restricting carbs is reducing the amount of time we're under an insulin load, right? And insulin, you'll learn about this if you haven't already, really is the driving hormone behind whether we are a glucose burner or a fat burner, and whether we are in fat storage mode or fat burning mode. Okay? Insulin is the driver behind that. It's both insulin and glucagon, but insulin really is the key driver. When insulin is up, we cannot burn fat. In fact, we are in fat storage mode. Insulin it's very much like testosterone, and then it's an anabolic hormone. Unlike testosterone, which promotes muscle growth, insulin promotes fat growth or adipose fat growth. It's the one that partitions, when it's high, it partitions glucose out of our bloodstream into muscle glycogen. So there's one good thing, but B, which is the predominant place where glucose goes, is into adipose fat storage. By bringing insulin down, 2 things happen. We stop that storage, that promotion of storage into adipose fat cells, but by bringing it down, we also allow our body to switch over into fat burning mode versus fat storage mode. So when we eat, look at this first graphic, when we eat typically 3 or more meals per day, what we do is we promote a large amount of time of our window of our day with high insulin, whereby we're storing and we're not burning fat. So the premise then behind intermittent fasting is to shorten that eating window, the feeding window. Most common by far is 16 and 8. So 16 hours, including your sleep time, but 16 hours per day total fasting, and all your calories are ingested in an 8-hour window. Now notice the second graphic. This actually shows how much more time insulin has decreased. Insulin has dropped on even just the most basic IF format of 16 and 8. I'm actually partial to 18 and 6 myself, where 18 hours a day are fasted and all my calories, 2,300, 2,200 of them, are ingested in a 6-hour window. One step further drastic is 20 and 4. Now you shouldn't use the word drastic, it's very common. Is 20 and 4, all calories ingested in a 4-hour window. And there's one beyond that called OMAD. So even in 20 and 4, I can still eat twice in a 4-hour window. I eat 2.5 times, 2 meals and a snack in my 6-hour window. But there is a regimen called OMAD, or 1 meal a day. And that person will eat all their calories for the day in about an hour. But in one, might be longer than normal, but in 1 meal. So call that 23 and 1. Now, intermittent fasting is a complete regimen in and of itself beyond keto. There is no requirement whatsoever for you to combine the two. People have had dramatic success just with keto. Others have had incredible success just incorporating IF into their lifestyle. But when you combine the two, magic happens. Next topic, guys, is testing for ketosis. As I mentioned, if you're like me and you don't want to just trust that you're in ketosis, you would like confirmation, you'd like to see proof, then there are ways to test for it. The first one, most basic, is ketone strips, urine strips. The reason that these work is because when you first start producing ketones, again, prior to being fat adapted, Your body actually isn't very good at it. Remember, you're not efficient at it yet. You're not enzymatically programmed to be good at producing ketones and burning ketones. So some get what we refer to as spilled or wasted in your urine. That's detectable. Now the ketone, in fact, there's 3 different kinds of ketones produced in the body, but the one that is excreted in urine is called acetoacetate. That's what these strips test for, acetoacetate. And so you can buy at just about every drugstore, Walmart, you can buy keto strips and you can use them. I'm going to give you a suggestion. Use them in the first couple months. Right? The reason for that is because, again, once you become fat adapted, they lose their efficacy. Right? They lose their ability to find wasted ketones. I will say this, Dr. Ben Bickman is a research scientist from Brigham Young, and he points out that our body, once in ketosis, never stops wasting ketones. We waste energy, which is really good for fat loss, in case you're wondering. I mean, how cool is that we waste energy? But we never really truly stop doing it. It's a feature of ketosis. However, it will diminish to the point where it may be undetectable. Nonetheless, when you urinate on keto strips, this is what you're looking for, some color. Now, people make the mistake of thinking the darker the color, the more they're in ketosis. Please don't use urine strips for that purpose. There are too many things that we do, too many variables that impact the color. Okay? What I want you to use these keto strips for is binary. You're either in ketosis or you're not. Okay? In that sense, any color is good color. Any color works. Any color means, yay, you are in ketosis. That's all that matters. Once you get used to using ketone strips, and for that matter, let's say 2 months down the road and you're fat adapted, the next good step for testing is a breathalyzer test. You can actually continue to test for acetoacetate in breath long after the urine strips have stopped being effective. So many people will migrate to a breath test. I actually say don't even bother doing that either. Proceed right to a serum test, a glucose and ketone test directly using a pinprick of blood. So the one I show here is a freestyle. The one I personally have is called a Keto Mojo. It looks like this. And the reason I'm partial to the Keto Mojo is the price is right. It's actually very economical at about $100. But it also takes both ketone strips and glucose strips in the same meter. So if you're curious about not just your ketone level, but also to see your fasting glucose drop as you get more and more adapted, then you can also do that with the Keto Mojo. Okay, so there are plenty of tutorials online. Do a search for how do I use a Keto Mojo or any other for that matter, the lifestyle I just showed you, and you'll see how to prick yourself. By the way, I carry one with me all the time. Not so much because I'm interested in testing my blood anymore. I'm really not. But I like testing the impact of foods. I'll tell you what I mean. I did a video, in fact, I'll link to it in the description down below, where someone said that too much protein will spike insulin. I call BS on that. And the reason I can do that is because I can do a test, and I have done this, and again, the video will show where I ingested 60 grams of protein in a sitting. 60 grams of whey in about 2 minutes. Okay, 60 grams of whey, and then I began testing every 15 minutes for the next 2 hours to see what the insulinic response is. Now, you're wondering, hold on, Mike, you just said the Keto Mojo tests glucose and ketones. How can you test for insulin? Good call if you caught that. There is no home test for insulin yet. Okay. However, insulin has 2 effects on the body. You may not know this, but if you don't, you will now. Insulin has 2 pronounced effects on the body. One, as we talked about, it pulls glucose out of your bloodstream and puts it into storage, whether in muscle glycogen or in fat cells. Well, guess what? I have a ketone meter, a Mojo, that can test for that. It can test for a drop in glucose. So if I get a baseline glucose, and for me it's right around 80 milligrams per deciliter, I'll use the American version. So if I drink back 60 grams of whey, and if there is an insulin response, I expect my glucose to plummet. If there's an insulin spike from amino acids in whey, which is what the premise is, then I should see that number drop from what? 80 to 60, 80 to 50, perhaps I could even go hypoglycemic. And yet, nada. Second is that insulin is the nemesis of ketosis. Nemesis, I mean, they are yin and yang. If you have high insulin, you cannot be in ketosis. If you have high ketosis, it's because your insulin is low, right? Point blank. So I expect that if my insulin is high, that my ketones will also plummet. So testing every 15 minutes for the next 2 hours after ingesting 60 grams of whey, if there is an insulinic spike, an insulinic response, I expect my ketones to drop. So I can take a baseline of about 1.1 millimole for ketones. ingest my 60 grams a whey, check every 50 minutes. And if it's true, if there is an insulin response, I expect to see my ketones drop. When neither of those two things happen, I now feel comfortable based on an N equals 1 study. That's me. N equals 1 meaning only one participant. I feel comfortable saying bull. If someone says that high protein is insulinic, nonsense. I can prove it's not, at least for me. Can you show me proof that it is for any ketonian? All right. That's how I use my Keto Mojo, in case you're curious. Next topic for discussion is macros. Do you count total or net carbs? This comes up every day in social media, the battle between total and net carbs. The premise, just so you know, is that those who promote total net carbs say if the carb goes in your mouth, regardless of what type it is, if the carb goes in your mouth, you must count it. Those of us that err on the side of net carbs say that no, it doesn't matter what goes in your mouth. It matters what hits your bloodstream. It matters what turns into serum glucose. I hope that makes sense, but there's the difference between the two philosophies. I am a net carb guy. If I ingest fiber, insoluble fiber or undigestible sugar alcohols like monk, perhaps some erythritol, stevia, and whether you like it or not, sucralose and aspartame. 0 cal, sweeten your stuff with it, but does not impact your glucose, your serum glucose. Well, any of those items then don't count towards your total carb intake. Net carbs, as you'll notice, which hit the bloodstream, are our only concern. I therefore promote a net carb philosophy. Now, here's what you got to be careful, though. Make no mistake, if you're one of those people who likes to go to the store and buy keto treats, keto makers have caught on to this. And they'll, on their boxes, put across the bottom, net carbs. Net carbs equals 1. Atkins boxes do this all the time. I'll go buy a little Atkins treat periodically when I go to the show with the kids, and the kids are having popcorn and some licorice and a root beer. I'll bring along a Premier protein shake of 30 grams and maybe an Atkins bar, right, to keep myself entertained, so that when they're passing around the licorice and the fuzzy peach, I got something. All right, we're all human. So on the front of the Atkins bar, it'll say 1 net carb or 2 net carbs. When you actually look at the ingredients, you're going to see probably 20 total carbs. So they've gotten very creative in that they'll put in 18 grams between fiber and sugar alcohols. Now, I'm not getting into the detail of what a fiber does in your stomach, in your gut, versus a sugar alcohol, but suffice it to say, they are not digestible. They do not hit your bloodstream. So I believe I can count 1 or 2, and I've proven in my own personal tests that doesn't break me. That as long as I stay net less than 25, I can stay in ketosis. You need to do the same before you can truly feel comfortable counting net carbs versus total. Right? Generally speaking, I say generally speaking because there is this thing called individuality, and you personally may have a slightly different response, let's say to erythritol, than I do. Now, here's why I say that. I have a reaction, an intolerance, if you will, to xylitol. Xylitol is one of the ones that I can actually detect for. If I eat something my wife makes sweetened with xylitol, which is a sugar alcohol, I can see a spike in glucose. Not a spike. I shouldn't have said spike. By the way, the definition of the term spike, you should look this up because it's way overused and incorrectly used in social media. Spike means a change by order of magnitude. A change by order of magnitude, meaning something's got to double or quadruple before you get to use the word spike. I'll give you an example. When they talk about an insulin spike, if you are in let's say our resting fasted insulin level in our bloodstream is, I can't remember the unit, but it's like 15 or 16 on a scale. And that could be totally fasted, 12 hours fasted. Let's say yours and mine is 15 on this scale. Well, after having something small, something light, let's say it goes from 15 to 18, okay? That will be called in social media and by some doctors who pass themselves off as keto gurus, they'll call that a spike. Bull. That is not a spike. That is a negligible delta at best of 3. Okay? A spike would mean it must at least go to 30 before you can call it a spike. All right? So be careful when you use the term spike. If I see it, I'll correct it. That's not a spike. That's a discernible bump, but that's not the same. That's making a mountain out of a molehill, truly. So where I was going with that is, if you're going to have sugar alcohols, find out which ones work for you and which ones don't. I want to digress really quickly and talk about the use of the word diet. In the keto space, diet is not really a well-received word. More popular is lifestyle, or WOE, way of eating. I don't worry about the semantics. You can decide how much it's important to you, but I want you to notice real quick. I'm going to throw up a graphic. I went just to Google and said, define diet. Notice definition number one: the kinds of food that a person, animal, or community habitually eats. Habitually eats. This is why, in case you're wondering, you know what we call the normal fare of the average Canadian or American? We call it the standard American diet. Truly not a diet, but in this definition number one, it is. It's a standard American diet. It's what our community habitually eats. Number two, the definition, of course, which is a special course of food that one restricts themselves to for the purpose of either losing weight or medical reasons. That's probably what you think of more often, right, when you hear the word diet. And it's for this reason that people who get tied up on the semantics of the word diet, they disapprove, because to them, keto is a lifestyle. It becomes a lifestyle change. Anyway, just so you're clear that if you see someone balk at the use of the word diet in relation to keto, this is why. Next up is keto flu. Used to be called the Atkins flu back in the 90s and early 2000s, but just like everything else, it's also adapted and modified itself to become the keto flu. Make no mistake, it's not a flu. It's not the influenza, it's not bacterial, it's not viral. It does, though, have symptoms that people will say makes them think they've got the flu or COVID for that matter. It can be devastating to some. I experienced it in the early 90s because didn't know what it was. There was not as much information, as much education, about as much knowledge as there is now about what it is, what causes it, and how to prevent it. So I'll throw up an image here. This first one, symptoms of the flu. I mean, look at those symptoms: dizziness, irritability, nausea. Sure, I never had that. I did have the constipation, the body aches, and the muscle cramps. Devastating, honestly. Headache and body aches, muscle cramps are what I felt. In fact, I'll throw up a second image, and the purpose of this second image is to show the symptoms versus what causes it. So as you notice, dizziness, headache, low salt. We now understand that what gives us symptoms of keto flu is electrolyte imbalances. Remember, we talked about how when you first go on the keto program, you could lose substantial amount of weight in the first week. But of that, typically 50% or more is water weight. As you stop ingesting carbs, your body goes through a period of just expelling excess fluids. And along with those fluids, as you know, the more you drink, the more you flush electrolytes. Well, if you spend the first 10 days of your keto journey urinating a lot, you're passing out these electrolytes. Sodium, magnesium, and potassium in particular are the three big ones. These, when they're low, will cause those symptoms we talked about. As you see here, dizziness, headache, confusion, irritability, anxiety, lethargy, and confusion, down to potassium, dizziness, low blood pressure. There's the nausea. I guess that might be why. Fatigue and cramping. Magnesium and potassium, they're so vital. Really have no idea. And so what we do now, and what I do with my clients, is make sure that they're well educated on keto flu ahead of time, that they're stocked up on a great source of sodium. It could be pink salt, Himalayan salt, Celtic salt. Even table salt is fine. It's iodized, which is good, but there are better. Redmond's red salt, for example, awesome. Celtic salt, so good. Pickle juice, great source of sodium. For magnesium and potassium, you can actually buy electrolyte powders. For example, I'll give you the reference to the one I like to use. It's by a company called Vega. I'll throw an image of it up quick. It's called Vega Hydrator, and it's nothing but an electrolyte mix. Tastes real good, mixed in water. I sip it while I'm working out and throughout the day. I like it because it's got 400 milligrams of potassium. Most potassium supplements are right around the 100 of maybe 200 milligram range. Just so you know, the ADI for a daily for an adult is 4.7 grams, so right around 5,000 milligrams. I don't know about you, I don't want to take 50 pills to get at 100 milligrams each enough potassium in the day, but a scoop or two, let's face it. I'm not a doctor, but your doctor will tell you my doctor told me that if I'm going to substitute and supplement potassium, get to about a gram, maybe 2 grams, but beyond that, he'd want to be involved in monitoring my blood percentages, my concentration of potassium, but he was good up to 2 grams. So I supplement a gram, and I'm going to tell you something, 1 gram of potassium a day and some magnesium, a couple hundred grams of magnesium biglycinate is the one I like to use. It's very easy on my system, 200 milligrams each, and I take 2 a day. So do that. Get educated about what this is. Do a search for what is keto flu. Stock up on some electrolytes. Get your sodium. But these 3 in particular, sodium, magnesium, potassium, very tough to overdo. You can, make no mistake, potassium, for example, is called hyperkalemia. You don't want that. But in order to get it, if you do some searching on how much do you have to take to get hyperkalemia, it's somewhere in excess of like 13 grams a day. It's very personal, but it seems to be in the 13 to 18 grams per day. And we're talking about substituting 1 or 2 grams. All right. If you get the experience, the symptoms of keto flu, you'll be glad you were taking, or please start taking right away, magnesium and potassium and sodium. Good. Hope that made sense. Are you curious if supplements are needed when you're on keto? Let's talk about that real quick. I don't believe that a truly whole food based diet should require any supplementation. So there are many people in the keto space who take nothing, feel great, get all the features and benefits of the keto lifestyle, and that may be you. I personally, though, from my own perspective, I'm not sure. So I do consider supplements like insurance. I'm of the same mindset that probably you are, that unless you're deficient, then paying for a supplement may not have any impact. However, I would rather err on the side of considering an insurance and spending some of my money. It's my money, it's my choice, it's your money. If you elect to spend a bit of money of your hard-earned dollars on supplements, whether it's needed, whether it's a deficiency that you can prove, or just for the sake of insurance, as long as they're not supplements that would damage you. We talked about hyperkalemia, right? Why would anybody take 10 grams of potassium? That'd be silly. But there is merit in a gram or two. So let's talk about that. When it comes to keto, I do believe that there's a couple that are considered mandatory. In fact, let's look at them. One we talked about, electrolytes. I do believe this is mandatory in every one of my clients unless they go to their doctor and their doctor expressly gives them a reason why they can't have electrolytes. My clients are all starting on electrolytes. Second, same with EFAs, essential fatty acids. You may think of them as EPA, DHA, which come from lots of fatty fish, from shrimp, from krill, okay, but they're omega-3s. We are looking to improve in keto our omega balance. And we tend to eat, because we do eat, I don't know about you, but I do eat a lot of animal meat that is higher in omega-6s. The inflammatory version, honestly, of the omegas. We need to offset that and improve the ratio by taking and supplementing some EFAs of the omega-3 variety. And you can do that via fatty fish. If you like herring, if you like sardines on a regular basis, oh my goodness, so good for you. I can't recommend that enough. I'm not a big fan of fish. I'll eat it on occasion, but I know I need to supplement a few grams a day, 3 grams a day of omega-3s to compensate in that profile. Okay, so I do consider, again, unless your doctor says that there's a compelling reason why you shouldn't be taking electrolytes and EFAs, then I'm going to recommend strongly, again, I'm not a doctor, not a clinical nutritionist, just 25 years of experience of working with people, of seeing what works, particularly when it comes to the keto lifestyle. Okay, hope that helps. As far as recommended goes, please look up apple cider vinegar and the benefits of pickle juice. Pickle juice ties back directly into electrolytes, so that's an easy way of getting some of them into you. ACV, apple cider vinegar, has a whole host of other reasons and benefits. We can talk about that. There are many videos online. Look up the benefits of apple cider vinegar. I'll do another video on that at some point, but as far as improving the digestive system, a little bit of a blood purification, bringing down your blood glucose levels, satiating. It actually ties over. It's an appetite suppressant. There's so many good things about apple cider vinegar. Please look it up. Vitamin B complex, vitamin C, a couple grams a day, and vitamin D3. All strongly recommended. Again, see your doctor or your clinical nutritionist to make sure if there's any concerns whatsoever. But a B complex and a couple grams a day of vitamin C, just so good for so many reasons, from our immune system to, again, cellular health, metabolism health. You'd be amazed if you look up the different Bs, the vitamin Bs, what they do, like niacin, vitamin B3. So good for so many reasons as far as improving our epigenetics, our DNA, chromosomal health. So good. I can't say enough about those. D3, obviously the healthy version of sunlight. If you don't think you get enough, supplement it. Go see your doctor, get your D3 levels checked. I personally am out in the sun as much as possible and still supplement a little bit of D3. It's very, very difficult with any of these to overdo it. Right? Again, if you have any concerns, see your doctor. But honestly, everyone's going to recommend some measure of vitamin B, C, and D3. If you do decide to go with the D3, then optional is vitamin K2. D3 and K2 have got a great synergistic effect. That they work so much better in a symbiotic relationship that makes sure that both can be better assimilated when taken together. In fact, more often than not, if you go look in the health food store, at your pharmacy, at your drugstore, at your local GNC, whatever the case might be, you're going to see that there's often D3 and K2 together. It may just say D and K. Make sure you're getting D3 and K2, which is the most bioavailable version of both. Okay? Glucosamine, chondroitin, and MSM. If you look these up, you'll find that they're very good for joint health. Phenomenal in that regard. So if you have any joint issues, mobility issues, flexibility, then I can't recommend enough these three. They will help you promote tendon and ligament strength, just all around good mobility, loosens up your joints. Look it up. Really, you want to talk to your doctor about these as well, but I don't know of a doctor who would say don't take MSM and chondroitin. So good for you. Pre-probiotics. Hey, we're improving everything about our health. We might as well make sure that our gut biome, that our stomachs, that the betaine, by the way, betaine hydrochloride improves the acidity of our stomach. The acidity of our stomachs lessens with age, right? That leads to heartburn and some other issues with absorbing the nutrients, assimilating the contents of the food we eat. Betaine hydrochloride is one, just like with prebiotics and probiotics, that they help establish and reestablish, build the flora in our intestinal tract. So good for so many reasons. And then depending on your lifestyle, I'm going to finish with this one. Depending on your lifestyle, the reason I bring this up is because these are completely optional, even more than the optional category. But I'm a big fan of anti-aging. I'll tell you why this is of interest to me. One day my son and I are driving through Calgary up here in Canada, and there was a report on the news of a guy celebrating, the oldest Calgarian was celebrating his 104th birthday. My son was all of 7 at the time, and my sons, they're very competitive, right? We all want to outdo each other. My sons are always competing, the three of them. And so this guy was being praised for being 104 years old in Calgary, and my son, 7 years old, from the back seat says, "Dad, 104 is pretty good, right?" And I said, yeah. This, by the way, was 8 years ago already. Yeah, 104 is great, son. Oh my God, 104 is awesome. "Dad," he says, "you can beat that though, right?" What do I say? Damn right, son. It's on. 105 is now my goal. Well, I began looking up anti-aging about 7-8 years ago. And in this space, huge, is a couple of really great pioneering doctors. Dr. Peter Attia is one of them. Dr. David Sinclair is another. You want to look them up. Anyway, they're big fans of these three, of resveratrol, berberine, and curcumin, all from an anti-aging perspective. So until they come up with something better that's more sirtuin boosting than these three, I'm on these three daily. Again, I'm not recommending it. I'm not your doctor, but you may want to bring these up and say, resveratrol, by the way, that active component in red wine. Can't drink red wine on keto, or very little of it, but you can take the resveratrol. Berberine and curcumin also have different anti-aging properties. And so depending on your goals, mine, of course, is not only to be healthy now, but to extend my age as long as possible through proper nutrition, through exercise, and through proper supplementation. Let's chat quickly about exercise while doing keto. Is it mandatory? Is it even recommended? So you know where I'm going. You got to know me by now well enough that you know I'm always going to recommend exercise. There's too many benefits to any form of exercise to avoid it. The question will come up though, do you need to exercise? Of course not. It is possible. In fact, many people, for mobility reasons or obesity or just haven't gotten around to it, have great success with the keto regimen and yet never exercise. However, as we've established, there is some muscle loss with that route. I truly believe, I'm one of those advocates that I say don't ever give away an ounce of muscle. Though that mitochondrial loss that you experience by losing any muscle mass will bite you in the butt later. Okay, Dr. Gabrielle Lyon is famous for saying that muscle is the organ of longevity. So if longevity is important to you, don't give up your muscle without a fight. Oh my goodness, I hope I've established that. So when it comes to exercise, I don't know why you wouldn't want to. And as we've established, there are 2 ways, and only 2 ways, to not only maintain the muscle you've got, but hopefully add a pound or 2 instead of losing. We've talked about protein. So let's touch on that really quickly. The standard American diet guidelines for protein is right around a gram per pound of ideal body weight, or of lean body weight. Let's look at it that way. So if I weigh, let's say for sake of easy numbers, 200 pounds. I'm just slightly less than that, about 190. But if I weigh 200 and I'm at 12% body fat, then I carry around 24 pounds of fat. Disregarding the 24 pounds means, let's call it roughly spade a spade, 175. So at most, according to standard American protein guidelines, I should be at 175 grams a day and no more. So when it comes to the keto lifestyle, I recommend now 1 gram per pound of total weight, just as a safety buffer. So I eat 200, my goal every day is 200 grams of protein, period, end of story, every day. Now, is there a downside to that? None. Not one, unless the only compelling reason that you would have to not eat 1 gram per pound is if your doctor says you have some kind of kidney filtration issues. If you have compromised kidney functionality that you're bringing with you to the keto lifestyle, oh my God, see your doctor. You need to come up with a plan, and it may include reducing kidney function, protein because of kidney function issues. Otherwise, there is no logical reason. If you hear of any reasons, it's purely conjecture and fear mongering. Right? There have been studies done on 3, 4, and 500 grams a day in normal, healthy people, and nary an issue. None. In fact, carnivores, just so you know, carnivores can eat 2 pounds a day of beef. Many do. 3 to 350 grams a day with zero impact. So people who worry about 60 or 80 or even 100 grams of protein a day don't know what they're talking about. They're just spreading the fear-mongering agenda. Okay, so now that we've established that, again, this is something you may want to take up with a nutritionist or with your doctor, but trust me, please, you can feel free to that in 25 years of working with people, no one's ever had an issue who came with healthy kidneys. No one's ever had an issue ever in 25 years from 1 gram per pound per day as your goal. All right, as your target. Now, getting back to exercise, we talked now about protein being one stimulus for not only sparing muscle, but also muscle protein synthesis, the ability to add a little bit of muscle. That requires building blocks, which is the amino acids that come from protein. The second, though, is resistance training. Resistance training. That means moving weight. That does not mean walking. It doesn't really, unless you're going up a hill, mean biking. It doesn't mean swimming. Those are all great conditioning exercises, and you should do them. Okay, they won't prevent muscle loss, though. Muscle loss, in fact, muscle growth, requires pressing against resistance, aka resistance training. You can call it weightlifting, you can call it bodybuilding. I don't care what the term is you use, but you need to move weight. Now, that could be as simple as body weight squats to get the ball rolling. Once you have a bit of mobility in your knees, do some lunges, right? It can be something as simple as that. If you have the ability to get some dumbbells or kettlebells and you can walk with them, swing them, do shoulder raises, do squats and lunges, deadlifts, those big functional lifts, you don't have to do many. You don't have to do many to stall muscle loss and or spark a bit of growth. But that combination of some resistance training with adequate amounts of amino acids via protein will A, prevent you from losing any, and B, hopefully add up a pound or two. If you made it this far, congratulations. Well done. I hope you learned a lot. I hope you weren't just entertained, but you actually walked away with a few things you can apply, was my goal. If you know of anybody who would benefit from that information or any part, any piece of it, according to the agenda, please don't just subscribe and do me a favor, but make sure you share this with anybody who you think would benefit from, who's considering keto, who's new to keto, and would benefit or has been misled and doesn't understand some of the information you've learned. So to finish the conversation, I'm going to end with 30 quick keto tips, keto tricks, keto tweaks, if you will, points to ponder. I'll run through them very quickly, 30 seconds apiece, and we'll finish off with this because there'll be a couple of insights that I've gleaned over the last 2 decades that I just want to share with you. Let's go ahead and get started. Point number 1, potatoes, bread, pasta, sugar. They were never your friend, just so you know, but never more so not than in keto. Grass-fed, everything when available. Same with wild caught when available. If you can't find it, can't afford it, it's not around, it's not available, do not sweat it. The lifestyle is just too good on its own to worry about this, but if it's available, snag it. Bacon. Can't say enough about bacon. Heaven. It really is. It's that perfect 1-to-1 ratio we talked about of protein to fat. So good, so delicious. Oh my God. If I could bacon wrap bacon, I'd do it. Pickle juice, we talked about that when it comes to electrolytes. It's just so darn good for you in so many ways. Get an ounce or 2 into you every day. Water, lots of it. Notice not the 100 ounces that people talk about. It's ridiculous, actually. There is zero science, by the way, that supports half an ounce per pound, which is by far the most popular dogma, or 8 glasses a day. All garbage, just oft repeated dogma that has no scientific support. Go look it up. You can't find any. No one ever lost a pound of fat by drinking more water. There's no correlation between the two. So drink when you're thirsty. Make sure you drink enough. If it's a hot day and you're working outside, drink more. But honestly, 50, 60 grams, plenty. Oh my goodness, all you do by drinking that much is exacerbate the problem of flushing out electrolytes, so now you have to take more electrolytes, okay? Don't do it. There's no need. If you want to drink 100 ounces, do it, but don't think you need to. That's probably the best way of putting it. Yeah, if you enjoy those Atkins or keto treats we talked about, everyone seems to have got them now. Slim Fast has got a whole line of keto treats that are using, as we talked about, fiber and sugar alcohols. Don't be surprised if the toilet, you'll know it. Right? You're not used to them, and it takes a bit to get used to this kind of fiber and these kinds of sugar alcohols. And don't be surprised if the toilet holds you accountable. Yeah, your breath. Remember we talked about how acetoacetate comes out in urine and in breath. Right? So don't be surprised if it doesn't invite kissing. Just be prepared to compensate. Sugar-free gum or a mouthwash or something. You know what I'm saying. You may stall. Don't sweat it. Listen, touching on this one for a minute, everyone stalls. It's the body's way of rebelling against a caloric deficit. And so it's going to reduce your metabolism. It's going to reduce your energy output, which is your resting metabolic rate, to try to battle you for supremacy, to see who's going to give in first. So you cannot call it you can, but you shouldn't call it a stall unless it's been 4 weeks. All right, try not to do that. Try to go 4 weeks. Persistence pays. We talked about that. You're going to win the battle if you're patient. So if you do stall, if it has been a month, and your weight hasn't budged, then you need to do something. You need to change something up. It could be creating a small further caloric deficit. I don't like that route because that's a never-ending game and your body will eventually beat you. So if I would recommend hold your calories constant and then create your caloric deficit in some other way, shape, or form, like exercise. Throw in an extra HIIT workout a week, create another 500 caloric deficit per week through HIIT or through resistance training. All right, that to me is my favorite. You could also mix things up. If you're not yet doing intermittent fasting, if you're eating 3 squares a day, so to speak, 3 meals, drop now to intermittent fasting. Try 16-8. If you're doing 16-8, try 20 and 4 for a couple of days. All right, awesome. Or throw in an extended fast. Why don't you try a 24 or a 36-hour fast? Hey, go from like your last meal Sunday until Tuesday at noon. Take all of Monday off. That's a 44-hour fast in case you're curious. From about dinner time on Sunday to lunch on Tuesday. Oh my God, congratulations if you can pull that off. I promise you that'll be a pound or 2 right there. Okay, amazing how that works. You can also mix up some other things like, remember I mentioned the PSMF diet? Take 2 days, double your protein and cut out both fat and carbs. Okay? I will mention one other detail when it comes to breaking a stall. You can eliminate something. Often you can look at the problematic 3, right? Eggs, nuts, and dairy, and you may decide to pull one out and create a caloric deficit that way. So probably the easiest one of them all is nuts. If you are taking in nuts, almonds or cashews or peanut butter, stall that. Take a week off of no nuts. Create a little bit of a caloric deficit, but strictly from something that's calorie dense like nuts, and see if that makes a difference. Figure out some way to eliminate one thing, but do one of those things at a time. Guys, don't do 3 of them at once. One at a time. Find out which one works so you always have something further to do the next time you stall in a couple of months. Cool? There will always be critics and keto police, always. People are so critical, judgmental nowadays, and so thin-skinned. Don't be surprised. I say screw them, but give them some tolerance, give them some space, move on. Eat that piece of birthday cake, celebrate that promotion, enjoy your anniversary. A cheat meal never killed anyone. So when you talk about stalling, people will often say, yeah, but I had a cheat day. I'm going to tell you something. I plan 2 refeeds per month. Okay? So 2 Saturdays a month, every other Saturday. I'm good all day until dinner, but from dinner through bedtime, open season. Now, I plan those. I want you to hear this. This, to me, is not cheating. It's part of my regimen. In fact, there's an entire modality built around this called CKD, cyclical keto dieting, whereby you, on purpose, in a targeted fashion, introduce carbs. And so when I say that I plan these 2 Saturdays, I plan it. It's part of my regimen. So now if I don't do it, now I'm cheating. Now I'm non-compliant. So you may elect then to plan these kind of special occasions, a birthday, a promotion, an anniversary, and plan it. You'd be amazed, though, the difference between having something happen to you versus you planning it and aiming for it and expecting it. See, when I used to cheat, if I gave in and I had no willpower and the kids are passing the M&Ms and I grab a handful and before I know it, I'm into the bag, okay? Or I sit down and accidentally grab a handful of Doritos and then the rest of the bag is mine. I feel crappy after that, don't you? We feel crappy after that because we gave in. Our willpower failed us. But you do it this way, that's cheating. That's demoralizing. That's actually psychologically damaging. Okay, we set a precedent of being unable to trust ourselves. When you plan it and it becomes part of your regimen, a reward, if you will, for 2 weeks of solid work, now you look forward to it. And now there is zero regret. There is zero psychological damage. There's no downside. Okay, so I don't just say eat that piece of cake and enjoy the celebration and the party and the anniversary, whatever the case might be, or Christmas. I actually plan for it. and there's zero repercussions. So consider that. Exercising, we talked about that. You don't need to, but well, why wouldn't you want to? Why would you give up an ounce of muscle? So if you can physically do something, do it. Don't make excuses. Get off your butt and do something. And remember this, just like earlier we talked about, there'll be critics and keto police. Everyone started somewhere. So if someone comes to you with a question that you may have had when you first started and they're brand spanking new, give them your time, right? Be patient with them. Don't weigh yourself daily. Yes. In fact, I actually say don't weigh yourself until at least a week, right? You don't need to see the daily fluctuations of your weight, especially if you're a woman. I hate to say it. Don't weigh yourself every day. Oh man, that'll drive you nuts. Even better, what you should do, so you know, is get one of those tailor's tapes and take measurements. Way more valuable than the scale. And even better than that, if you ask me, is one of those scales that you can buy anywhere online, or Walmart has them. Is those ones that have got that those sensors on it that send a little current, an impedance current up and down your body, and based on the timing it takes of that current, it can tell your body fat percentage. I love that. I love knowing that I can jump on the scale once or twice a month and see what my body fat weight is, my body fat weight, and my body fat percentage. That to me is the number you need to know, not everything else. You don't need to weigh your body water and your bone density. Garbage. Okay? Some of us have no choice. If that's the only scale you've got, great, but take it with a grain of salt. Water retention on a daily basis, the difference will mess you up. So do it no more often than weekly, but preferably get one of those scales that can do body fat. Hey, we talked about Bulletproof Coffee. It is your call. It's not necessary. If you don't like coffee, don't go out of your way to drink it. If you do love your coffee, try it with some heavy whipped cream like I do. Or we talked about one comment about it. It's not fasting friendly. Don't think you can have a bulletproof coffee when you're fasting. If you're like me, my gauge is insulin, and no, a bulletproof coffee doesn't impact insulin, but I still can't justify 200 calories and call it fasting. Another topic for another day. By far, the vast majority of people start keto to lose weight, right? You know that's true. If you started at your ideal weight and you just came here to get healthier, not to lose weight, great. But you can't assume that's everyone's case, because probably 99% of people came here. Just jump into social media and look at all the before and after pictures. People are proud of their weight loss, right? So people who show up and they're all high and mighty about I'm here to get healthy, maybe once you were here, you picked up a health-centric focus, but 90+% of people came here to lose weight and get healthy and get fit. Don't beat yourself up if you don't lose 20 pounds a week, of course, and yet you know something. The number of people who jump into social media and say, I only lost 2 pounds my first week. In what world did losing 2 pounds in a week turn into a failure and not a total freaking success? Anyway, it'll test your patience, keto. So know that. Go in with persistence. Win the race. There are a million keto options. We talked about that for meals. Do some digging, for crying out loud. Go drop by Costco. They got like 10. My Costco here has got 10, no less than 10 keto cookbooks. Do some digging. Don't ever let me hear that you think you're bored of what to eat. That just means you did no looking. You didn't Google keto recipes. You didn't buy a cookbook, because there's thousands. Most doctors don't understand keto. This is important to know. I have a doctor client, and he said that they take exactly one course in 1 semester on nutrition in their 7 years of schooling. 1 semester. And it's based on the standard American diet. It's based on old science and old philosophy. They know nothing about keto and low carb and zone diet and paleo and vegan. They learn nothing about any of these. So if you show up and you talk about keto, you may hear stuff about cholesterol and high blood pressure and nonsense and kidneys and liver. And anyway, just know that after watching this hour of my video, if you watch this entire content, you probably know more than your doctor does about keto. They're catching on, but don't be surprised if your doctor knows nothing about keto. Don't be surprised. Hey, you may have someone in your life that's not supportive. Most people do. Hey, for some of you, it's your spouse. That's tough. I often jokingly say that some marriages just aren't worth saving. Not true. Not true. Don't lose your marriage over food. That'd be ultra silly. But nonetheless, just don't be surprised if you don't have someone in your life that's supportive and you wish they were. Okay. Results, though. Results speak. You show them you're getting healthier, getting fit, losing fat. That's hard to argue with. You'll tend to win them over. If you are working out, do yourself a favor and do it fasted. Okay, try not to eat before you go. You're already a fat-burning machine. That just gets exacerbated, gets exaggerated, gets promoted in the gym if you're doing so fasted. You'll burn a ton of calories from fat. So good. Somewhere along the journey, you may have a lot of gas. Enough said, especially if you like those keto treats. Again, we talked about how they're made with fiber and sugar alcohols. Anything that ferments, of which sugar alcohols do, right? They'll ferment in your gut. Your bacteria in your gut loves that. Your gut biome loves the fermentation. However, you'll notice. Hey, don't let anybody shame you. We talked about this, about the difference between lazy and dirty, or what I call flexible. The people that are strict ketonians tend to be judgy, and you may get a little bit of shaming if you elect to go the flexible route like I've described. If that's the case, don't be surprised. People, we're thin-skinned these days. People are very judgy, very condescending. Just expect it, okay? But as long as you're losing weight, as long as you're getting healthier, as long as you like the result, don't sweat it. There's a term, we talked about this term you should know about called getting fat adapted. It takes between 3 and 6 weeks. Look forward to it. Get through it. Just decide you're going to start keto and you're going to give it 2 months so you can at least get to this fat adapted stage, and then you can decide what happens after that. But don't quit inside the fat adaptation phase. How silly would that be? We're almost there. Last couple of pork rinds. We talked about that. I love it, covered in meat and cheese. It's very much a pseudo nacho. You can decide if you like them. Some do, some don't. Figure it out. Electrolytes, can't say enough about them. Intermittent fasting is great. We talked about it. It's not necessary. If you do it and you do keto at the same time, yeah, you're in for some magic. We also talked about protein. To finish this topic off, you really can't ingest enough. You can't ingest enough protein, so don't sweat the dogma. Don't sweat what you read. Just go ahead and enjoy your protein, get a little bit extra in, and hopefully save a bit of muscle, if not grow a pound or two. And lastly, it's not possible for 100 milligrams of aspartame and sucralose to do anything. So if you like a Diet Coke occasionally or a sugar-free Monster like I do occasionally, God bless you. Enjoy it. Enjoy it. Okay. People will talk about how they're poison and the exaggeration is off the chart. I mean, you would think that if they were toxins and poisons, you would think people would be falling over dead. I know people who drink 4, 5, 6 Diet Cokes a day. Tickety-boo. No problems, no issues. Where's the poison? Our longevity nowadays is better than it ever has been. More centenarians today drinking Diet Coke than have ever existed ever. How's that possible? So they're taking innuendo and supposition and correlation and making it causation. I hate it. I really, truly do. Therefore, they are truly the definition of keto safe. They are keto friendly. You can't argue that. They're 0 carbs, 0 calories. That is the definition of keto safe, and they're fasting safe. So I chalk that up to people's lack of research. I chalk it up also a little bit of stupidity. I don't have time for that nonsense, okay? Until someone comes out with a study that clearly, decisively proves that aspartame and sucralose are a problem, it's fear-mongering. So if you decide not to drink them, it is entirely your call. Just know that there are no keto-centric reasons to avoid any of the sweeteners, right? There isn't. If you decide, though, that for health reasons you want to avoid it, that's a completely different topic. Make no mistake, that is not a keto-centric argument. That's a health-centric argument, and you're welcome to make it. If you want to give in to, and avoid sucralose and aspartame because of the potential for health issues, God bless. Just don't mistake that with keto-friendly. Okay, and I tell people all the time there are 2 different topics. There's keto-centric and there's health-centric. The 2 really are separate because I decide that I'm going to do everything keto-friendly, which aspartame and sucralose qualify. And if you fear them because of health-centric reasons, that's your prerogative, but don't knock keto because of it. Anyway, I hope that made sense. On that note, folks, really appreciate your time. Thank you for being patient and getting through all this. If you enjoyed some of that information, sure like to hear about it in the comments section. Please hit the like button as well. Appreciate that as well. If you know anybody who would benefit from the video or any part of it, please share it with them. Don't forget to hit subscribe. And on that note, folks, comments in the comment section. We'll see you in the next one.